And we continue at 107 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios. Mr. Randy Wags at the sports desk in Culver City.
Well, John, it looks like enough is enough. Oakland police are finally trying to crack down on the record-breaking car break-ins. They held a press conference where they made 7 whole arrests. And Sheng Tao was not just armed with the facts. She was armed with her own bucket full of cliches.
We are standing together. We are standing together, hand in glove, as one Oakland to say we will not stop until we get to a safer Oakland.
She may be the worst mayor in the state.
That is saying something.
No kidding.
I mean, now that Garcetti's out of the country, I think you're right.
800-222-KABC is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a columnist for Cal Matters. You can read him online at calmatters.org and follow him on Twitter at Dan Calmatters. Dan Walters, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Hey, Dan. Thanks so much for coming on. So the big news statewide is the appointment of LaFonza Butler to be the next U.S. Senator from California to fill out the remaining portion of Dianne Feinstein's term, which goes until January of 2025. And as I sit here reading about LaFonza Butler and reading about the other people that were on the short list and the process that took place to choose her to fill Dianne Feinstein's term, I say to myself, the people who have to be the angriest about this pick are elected California Democrats. And I say that because if you're currently in the race for this U.S. Senate seat, if you're Adam Schiff, if you are Katie Porter, if you are Barbara Lee, you were told by the governor that this was going to be a caretaker appointment, that there would be strings attached to this appointment, and they would not be running for a full term. Well, that's what Newsom promised, and then Newsom went back on his promise and made it very clear that there were no strings attached to this appointment at all, that if she wants to run for a full term, she is free to run for a full term, and he thinks that she would be a great United States Senator. The other group of elected Democrats in the state who might have a problem with this, to my eye, are the ones who are in so many of the elected offices that are governed by voter-imposed term limits. If you're in the state legislature, if you're a statewide constitutional officer, if you're a big city mayor, and you're limited to the number of terms you can serve because the voters decided that that would be the case, you're constantly looking for another office to run for. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be you that gets the appointment, but if you or someone else gets the appointment, that frees up another office. And then you play a game of musical chairs where everyone gets something new to run for and everyone wins. If you give the appointment to someone who was registered to vote out of state and is not currently holding office in California, that doesn't create any openings. That doesn't create any movement for any of them. And I'm sure they're not happy with what happened too. Your thoughts on the appointment and the reaction among elected Democrats?
Well, all those elected Democrats are falling in line and praising her, the new selection of senators. It's wonderful, terrific, it's great, it's great, it's great. Even some of the people who are running for this office are saying that. But, politicians say things that doesn't necessarily, as you indicate, mean the same thing. I think there probably are a lot of disappointed Democratic politicians who would like nothing better than a seat in the United States Senate. But I think the biggest takeaway from this whole episode is Gavin Newsom tends to say things and then kind of forget about it after the fact. And then if you call him on it, which is an interesting thing because, like on this situation, he says, well, that's all just theoretical and hypothetical and blah, blah, blah. There's no money. So he diminishes his own credibility by saying things and then flipping over. In this particular case, just literally a few weeks ago, he says, a few days ago, he says that he is going to make an interim appointment to the Senate if there was a vacancy. It would be a black woman interim appointment. That's the term he used, interim appointment. And it was taken widely to say that means it would not be Barbara Lee because she wants the office permanently. And it would be, as the term art is called, caretaker. It would be a caretaker. And then he flips over and appoints Miss Butler and says, well, she can run if she wants to, because he said he didn't want to interfere in the next year's Senate election by naming a permanent person. And then he turns around and says, well, but she can run, which basically interferes with the election next year. So it is a credibility situation with him. And he's gotten roundly criticized by myself and other pundits in the state for not being trustworthy, not meaning what he says, and abandoning what he says very quickly. And this is not a new trait with him. We've seen this before. You remember he said he would absolutely bring single-payer health care to California if elected governor. And as soon as he was elected governor, he said, well, I really can't do it because it's too difficult. He said he was going to build 3.5 million housing units if he was elected governor. And afterwards he said, well, we really can't do that. So he has this credibility problem. And if he indeed attempts to take his career further, like in running for the White House circa 2028, this is going to come back to haunt him. It's haunted other politicians when they've gotten caught saying one thing and doing another, and it will haunt him. I mean, the incumbent president, Joe Biden, has had a problem of that nature during his entire career. Remember, he got nailed once for plagiarizing people and whatnot. In politics, your credibility is your currency. And when he does these sorts of things, Gavin Newsom undermines his own credibility. Why should we believe anything he says if he's been proven to not be trustworthy in what he said in the past? That's an instruction that's given to jurors in criminal trials, that if you find that a witness has been falsely testifying in one case, you should be suspicious of what they say in other elements as well. That's an instruction given to jurors. And I think it's also an instruction we should do for politicians. If you find them to be not trustworthy in one case, why should you trust them in another instance? And I don't think he, for some reason, understands that. He kind of has this idea that I can say anything I want to say, and it doesn't really make any difference in the long run. I say whatever will get me through that particular moment, and it doesn't matter if I renege on that later. And he's playing with fire. I mean, in the end, he's the one he's damaging himself by doing this sort of thing. And it's a habit of his. It goes back all the time he's been in politics.
I have the exact quote that you referenced in front of me. It was said on NBC News' Meet the Press with Chuck Todd. Here is what Newsom said. Yes, interim appointment. I don't want to get involved in the primary. It would be completely unfair to the Democrats that have worked their tail off. That primary is just a matter of months away. I don't want to tip the balance of that, end quote. Do you think that he was caught off guard by that question and didn't anticipate it coming and just spoke off the cuff? Or do you think he went on Meet the Press intending to put that out there?
I don't think he intended to put it out there. I think, as his previous comment, when he was asked about whether he would name a black woman to the Senate 2 years ago, it was an off-the-cuff, oh, yeah, sure, I will do that. I think he has a tendency to say whatever he thinks will get him through that moment in time, and without much of a thought as to how it will play in the longer run, how it will affect himself and his credibility in the longer run. And when you call him on that credibility thing, like in this case, as he did just this week, he kind of shrugs his shoulders and says, basically, that's of no matter, or not, that doesn't matter. And that's a tendency of his that's been true all throughout his political career, back when he was in San Francisco, is he tends to say what he thinks will get him through the moment, what will play well at that moment, and then has to deal with it later. And he doesn't, for some reason, grasp how that erodes his own credibility. Because, in the workaday world of politics, particularly in things like capital politics, where you're dealing with legislators and lobbyists and all that sort of thing, your word is your bond. And he's had trouble with legislators in the past saying one thing and then turning around and doing another. And it's made them not willing to trust him to follow through on what he tells them. It's been a problem in dealing day to day with legislators of his own party. And then, of course, with the media. I mean, he got roasted by every pundit in the state for this flip-flop he did on the interim appointment and then suddenly appointing somebody who's free to run for the office. He somehow doesn't grasp that. He thinks he's above it, or he's not going to be held responsible for it, that people won't remember what he said and hold him in. And it goes right back to in this instance, back to when he was running for governor and made all these promises of what he was going to do if he was elected governor, and then tossed him aside as soon as he got the office. And people remember those things. He doesn't have to worry about the voters of California anymore. He's been elected and reelected and survived a recall. But that will go into the book, as it will, for any future campaigns he runs for president or anything else. Yeah, I think it kind of reminds me in a way of Jerry Brown during Jerry Brown's first governorship back in the 70s. Jerry had this kind of bad habit of saying something at the moment and then having to do a 180-degree turn later. You might recall, for example, Jerry denounced Proposition 13 when it was on the ballot in 1978, said it was a terrible thing, it would ruin the state, and so on and so forth. But as soon as it passed, he declared himself to be a born-again tax cutter and embraced it. And people remember those things. They remember that you're not a person of your word. You can't really be trusted. That you're just being shifty. He gives you that image of being shifty and unreliable. And it's going to haunt Gavin Newsom if he pursues his career beyond the governorship of California. People will remember that. And if he does it, it's one thing to do it in California and shine on the people in the California press corps. He goes out on the campaign trail for president and starts pulling that kind of stuff. He's going to get roasted, and he'll get roasted really badly if he tries to pull that stuff in a national campaign.
Who up there was money in the bank? When they told you something, you could believe it, always shot straight with you?
Well, it's really most politicians do. Most politicians are very careful of what they say, and they know that they make a commitment. And this is more involved in the backroom politics of lobbyists and legislators and staff members and those people when they're rolling around and they're trying to make deals on legislation. When you say, I will do this, the other people that are into the deal have to assume that you're going to do it. And when a politician doesn't follow through on a promise, that hurts them. In the retail world of politics, within the back rooms of the Capitol, that will hurt you, and it hurts you badly. And it's hurt Gavin Newsom with his own people from his own party of telling him one thing and then flipping over and doing something else on things like the state budget and whatnot. So most politicians are careful not to do that, don't promise something you're not willing to do. Don't make the promise in the first place unless you're willing to follow through on it, because your word is your bond. So much of politics is not written down. It's not a contract, and it's not notarized and that sort of thing. It's people saying, we will do this, and the other people saying, okay, if you do this, I will do that, making a deal. and you're supposed to, it's a handshake deal, and you're supposed to follow through on it. And if you don't, then people won't trust you to make deals anymore, and they won't deal with you anymore. That's the way it works. And it's the same thing with the press. If you talk to a politician and you say, tell me something, and you say, well, this has to be off the record, and you say, okay, it's off the record, you don't go out and quote him, because then you have destroyed your own credibility, and they're not going to talk to you anymore. The same thing if a politician talks to a reporter and gives them off-the-record information, and he turns out that he was shining you on, you're not going to talk to that guy anymore. You're not going to trust him to tell you the truth of it. It's all there's this unwritten code of, in retail politics, you don't renege on your word. And Gavin Newsom reneges on his word, and it's hurt him within the legislature, and it's going to hurt his political career if he keeps on doing it.
Last question before you go. LaFonda Butler, of course, became Gavin Newsom's choice for this U.S. Senate seat. Who was the voice? Do we know who was the voice in Gavin's ear pitching her, advocating for her? I know that she worked at Bear Star Strategists over in San Francisco for a while. She worked for Kamala Harris. She worked with A. Smith, who is the consultant that runs Gavin Newsom's campaigns. Was it A. Smith and Kamala Harris that were really pulling for her?
I think that she was on the on the radar a long time ago. She was involved in things with Newsom for a long time. I don't know that it may have been, and I don't profess any particular inside knowledge on it. It may have been simply that he could not get anyone else to do it, at least on the terms that he originally said it would be, which would be an interim appointment. I think there are other black women politicians who would have taken the position if they were free to run for the seat. For one, I think Shirley Weber would have done it as Secretary of State. And I think it's possible that London Breed, the mayor of San Francisco, might have done it because she's got a tough re-election coming up. I don't think Karen Bass would have done it. I don't think some of these others, but I think there are people who, if they knew that they could run for the seat, would have taken the job. I think what happened is he got a little bit desperate. He needed somebody, and that somebody wasn't willing to be a 15-month appointee. And he was under tremendous pressure from the Democratic leadership in the Senate to get somebody there as fast as humanly possible, because they are paper thin in their majority, and they need that seat to be filled ASAP, and he was under pressure to fill it ASAP. And I think maybe that was the only deal he could make, was he could not say it's only for 15 months. I don't think she would have taken it for that. That's my guess. It's just a guess, really. But I think that there are people who would have taken it if he said you can go ahead and run, and particularly if he'd have said that up front rather than putting this interim appointment stuff in there that he slipped in there and then completely started backtracking on. As soon as he knew he was under the gun, they backtracked on that and said no, they can run. That was even before he announced Butler as the nominee. They were saying that, oh, well, yeah, we're not going to put any conditions on whoever it is. It was a strange thing, and I think Newsom, in a way, he kind of panicked. He panicked when he was asked about the appointment in the first place. He was panicked when he said black woman. He panicked a little bit when he was asked about whether it would be an interim appointment or not. And then he panicked when he found out he could not really get anybody to take the job that was acceptable if he put that condition on.
Dan Walters.
It was a bad performance by the governor all the way around.
Dan Walters, political columnist for Cal Matters. You can read him online at calmatters.org and follow him on Twitter at Dan Cal Matters. Dan, we learn so much every time you're on. Thank you for stopping by and loaning us your expertise.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, we have a handy-dandy, spiffy new app.
That's right. It's the new KABC app. Search for the Apple Podcast Store, the Android Store, the Apple App Store, the Android Store for KABC AM 790 KABC. It is the easiest, least hassle way to listen live to this station, like from noon to 3, whenever you're in an area where it's not so easy to listen to an actual AM radio, you can listen to the app. Not only that, you hit the podcast button, and there it is, all the podcasts of the John Phillips Show at your fingertips. It works with CarPlay. It is the easiest way to listen to this station and to this show, whether it's from noon to 3 live or podcast from 3 to noon.
It is Woo Wednesday.
Ric Flair.
It's Woo Wednesday. Yeah, baby. Woo, 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 woo.
And that means tomorrow is Throwback Thursday.
That's right. In about an hour, we're going to open up the phones. And if you've got a suggestion for the music playlist on tomorrow's show, something real creative. Last week, it was songs by Desi Arnaz in honor of
we got some wobbly knees allies.
So that was fantastic. Something real creative is going to cut through. Whatever your suggestion is, we want to hear it when we ask you to call in. That's going to be in about an hour, and we'll pick one lucky listener to choose all the music for Throwback Thursday.
But Randy, George Gascon, whose nickname shall not be named,
but you can email us if you want to know what it is at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com.
Quite frankly,
he sat down for an interview with Fox 11's Alex Michelson.
That's right. Let's hear what George Gascon has to say about the concept of cash bail.
Do you think that cash bail is unconstitutional?
I believe that how much money you have in your bank account should not determine whether you're going to get out or not. I have many examples of people that have posted cash bail, and they have gone out to hurt other people. I've also seen...
And then we revoke their bail.
That's right. And then we punish them additionally.
I've also seen people that have been released without cash bail and have gone out to commit other crimes. I strongly believe that if you have an open case, you should not be released.
Yeah, but what happens if it takes 30 days to even have anyone know if there's an open case, which is the situation we're in right now thanks to your policies?
Well, then you can break the law 30 times.
If we determine that you're a danger to our community, you should not be released. It doesn't matter how much money you have. On the other hand...
You know who George Gascon doesn't believe is a danger in his community? People who are on probation that he finds with guns in their car.
That's right. In other words, criminals.
If it doesn't appear that you're a danger to our community, you don't have other open cases, we have a whole structure that's being built around releasing a person and allowing the person to show up for court when they're being cited.
That's right. 30 days later, instead of an arraignment in 2 days, leaving them open for a whole month to commit as much crime as they want, and even the police don't know.
What this is exactly what he loves doing. It's Orwellian word games. Accountability is giving you a slip and not keeping you in jail. Determining whether or not someone is a danger to the community. No one's a danger to a community unless you're wearing the hockey mask and your name is Jason.
It's also important to understand jail capacity, right? Mm-hmm. Our jail is overcrowded. We are currently...
Yes, and why is that? Why doesn't anyone ever want to talk about that the state forced the prisons to take everyone out of there that they consider not violent and shove them to the jails, overcrowding the jails, making the jails have to shove everyone else out?
AB 109.
We are currently releasing people that should not be released sometimes, just simply because we don't have the space.
So are you advocating for the Board of Supervisors to not close Men's Central Jail, George Gascon, or are you the opposite on that issue?
Oh, don't be silly, Randy.
If you get convicted of a crime in the county, you're doing only a portion of the time of your conviction because there is not enough space for the people that are coming in. About 40% of the people that are in our jail have mental health problems, and frankly...
Yeah, and 100% of our district attorney has mental health problems.
Keeping them in jail for a few days does not alleviate their problem. We need to have other avenues to deal with this.
See, if people that actually have to go to Men's Central Jail, those are the real victims because the conditions are horrible.
He sounds just like the male version of Holly Mitchell.
So is that a yes? Do you think that
I
cash bail is
personally believe
unconstitutional?
that cash bail is unconstitutional, and I tell you why. The Constitution says that we are innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
You're not proven guilty until the time is you either plead to some offenses, you plead to them, and you accept the plea deal, or you get convicted by a jury and sentenced. But what we have with cash bail is we have a system where people may be held back for months, sometimes multiple months, waiting to have their day in court, and sometimes only to go out and actually be released, be proven not to have committed the crime or committed something other than what they were being booked for. I personally...
Are you lost?
Well, what he doesn't want two things. He doesn't want an additional layer of punishment on criminals for breaking the law, because he thinks that we've been punishing them too much as it is. The other thing is that he believes that cash bail benefits the businessman who gets the DUI and punishes the gang member who's in there for gang activity. And that's not equitable in his mind.
I personally believe that cash bail is something that was created, over 100 years ago. I think the utility of that process is no longer there. And again, there are many jurisdictions that have been doing without cash bail for many years, and they're working just fine.
Yeah, how about in 2020 when we had a zero bail system because of COVID? Did crime go up or did crime go down? Oh, crime went up.
Cash bail, removing cash bail from the books was one of the reasons that Chesa Boudin got recalled from office in San Francisco.
They're making us look bad. Here is Alex asking George Gascon if this policy is going to make us less safe or safer.
Are you concerned that this change in policy could make people less safe?
I think going to the Republican convention in Anaheim gave Alex a cold.
You think he got COVID from Ulysses Hernandez at some point this week?
It's possible.
This change in policy could make people less safe.
I am concerned that when we have people that have open cases under the current court policy, that is not a factor that would automatically hold you back during the pre-arraignment process.
So wait a second. Even if we know that you already have an open case, you've already been arrested, you've already been cited, and everyone knows about it, we're still citing people.
It is really, really hard to imagine. I know I said this about people on the Board of Supervisors. How did this guy ever get elected countywide?
Again, I want to make it very clear. Once we get into an arraignment, then we have a prosecutor, and we can argue those things. The problem is that people actually go through this interim process before a prosecutor ever gets to see the case. I'm very concerned that if you have an open case, let's say that you were involved in a smash and grab, or you were involved in car theft, or any other offense, and you are released, and then you go out and you reoffend before you even have your next day in court, I don't believe that you should be released again.
Yeah, but that's what's happening now.
Yes. Everything that's going on right now is going on because he wants it to happen. He will plead ignorance or say that he had nothing to do with it if there's a bad outcome, but rest assured, that office is doing exactly what he wants them to do.
So what can you do?
But not because of...
Alex, what's going on, buddy?
You need some tea.
What can you do?
But not because of cash bail. You should have just released.
So then should there be a different process, like a 24-hour arraignment court or some sort of system where the state is talking to each other about who's being cited? I mean, should there be specific changes to avoid that situation?
Yeah, I personally think, look, there are places like the state of New York that has, courts that are working 7 days a week, around the clock. I believe that we should have that. I believe that...
But we don't have that, so instead we're just going to let everybody out.
No. The only place you can find night court in this state is on Nick at Night.
It should be, rather than citing and releasing people, you should be able to get in front of a magistrate immediately. You should have the defense and the prosecutor, and you argue the merits of the case, and you either get released or you get detained. I absolutely believe that should be the case. Now, that's not where we are today. Right. The court is trying to get somewhere there by providing a magistrate 7 days a week available to review those cases where they have said that requires magistrate review. So again, you got the three tiers: cite, release, You get cited and released in the streets. Basically, you have book and release. You go to the station, you get booked, you get your photo taken, you get released, and then you have magistrate release. And in those cases,
so we don't have any situation where we hold somebody back because they're a danger to society.
Oh no, those people we went out among us.
The police has to present the case to a magistrate. There will be around 7 days a week, and they will make a determination whether the person is going to be released or there are some other conditions that are going to be placed, including pretrial detention.
We're going through the sound of George Gascon sit down with Fox 11's Alex Michelson.
Let's hear more about citing and releasing.
Do you think that there should be either a countywide or even a statewide process where law enforcement can talk to each other and know if somebody has just been cited within the last 24 hours so they're not released?
How hard would that be?
They don't want that. It's just like with immigration. They could link all of these databases immediately if they wanted to, but they don't want to because they don't want them to have access to the information.
I think that is absolutely the case. And, if you're book and release, that already exists, right? Because the system, as soon as you get booked, that generates a system-wide notification this person was booked for a particular crime.
Then everyone should be booked, no more tickets.
Seems reasonable to me.
When you're cited and released.
And George Gascon and the Board of Supervisors and the people of the courts, they're all saying that the police officers have discretion here. So if that's really true, then I don't care what the situation is, the cops got to bring everybody in every single time.
Well, if the cops have discretion, I'm sure that's news to them.
That's the thing. And that's what the sheriff was saying. That's what the police chiefs were saying. This is all news to us. Now all of a sudden you're saying we can do our jobs?
When you're cited and released, because it's more like a citation, it takes a while for the system to catch up. I absolutely believe that there should be a system that accounts for that. That is not the case today. Now, we should also know that on the cite and release part of it, you're really talking about very, very minor offenses. Driving without a license, you're talking about low-level misdemeanors, driving a suspended driver's license.
Yeah, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about thieves.
Yes. Keep in mind, this man has a very bastardized view as to what is not violent and what is not serious.
He was just a minute ago complaining that residential burglary is a cite and release. And now he's saying, it's just people that are driving with a suspended license.
So that's the type of offense you're talking mostly on the cite and release, very low-level theft. But should it be a system there that we can see immediately? Absolutely.
Man, oh man. I know it shouldn't surprise me every time I hear him open his mouth, but it still does.
We're just getting started, Johnny.
All right. But Randy, let's go to the phones.
Let's go to Rick in Camarillo. Rick, you're on the John Phillips Show. Hello.
How are you? So Gascon is a moron. He says that in his opinion, that bail is not constitutional. However, in the 8th Amendment of the Constitution, it says excessive bail shall not be required. So to have excessive bail, you have to be able to have bail. And there was a case back in '84 that they talked about the need for bail to be set by a court. And California's always had this. When you're booked, you're given bail. If you want to appeal that or get a bail, what's called a bail deviation, then you can apply for a bail deviation, and then the court can either raise or lower the bail depending on who's requesting the deviation. And in this '84 case, it said very specifically that if it's on the defendant to claim that bail is excessive and file a request with the court. So the system exists. I was a cop for over 40 years, and I remember we used to have booking approvals. And if you made an arrest, you were required to release the suspect unless one of 10 things applied. And number 7 was the one that always stuck with me, which was that there was a reasonable likelihood that the offense would continue or resume. When you have these guys doing these multiple smash and grabs or multiple burglaries or thefts from Target or whatever, that would be a number 7. He would not be eligible for an OR. He'd have to be booked. He'd have to be make bail.
Well, you're 100% correct, sir. And George Gascon probably doesn't know the information that you just talked about because he was never a professional deputy district attorney. What he was a political appointee in San Francisco by Gavin Newsom. He was a police chief by trade, Mesa, Arizona, and then San Francisco. And I don't know if he went to night school to get his law degree or what, but he was never a professional deputy district attorney. He was a political appointee. He has no idea what the law is. He has no idea what's legal. He is an ideological militant, and that's why he's giving us the insanity that he's giving us.
Quite frankly.
Thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it. We've got one more hour coming up on the John Phillips Show right here on Talk Radio 790 KABC.
We got some wobbly knees allies